Shaq and Kenny headline 9 media members delivering their picks for the opening round. Here's who our TNT Sports experts are picking to advance past the first round. 1. Boston vs. 8. Miami. Steve Ashburner, NBA.com. Carlos Boozer, NBA TV. Brendan Haywood, NBA TV. Shaquille O'Neal, NBA on TNT. Sean Powell, NBA.com. John Schumann, NBA.com. Kenny Smith, NBA on TNT. Steve Smith, NBA TV. Michael C. Wright, NBA.com. Celtics in 4. Boston is simply the much better team, especially with Butler unlikely to play. While Miami was able to stifle the Bulls' 19th ranked offense to get here, it now faces a much tougher challenge. The Celtics are a machine and they shouldn't have much trouble reaching the conference semifinals for the 7th time in the last 8 years. John Schumann, who explains his pick and more. 2. New York vs. 7. Philadelphia. Steve Ashburner, NBA.com. Carlos Boozer, NBA TV. Brendan Haywood, NBA TV. Shaquille O'Neal, NBA on TNT. Sean Powell, NBA.com. John Schumann, NBA.com. Kenny Smith, NBA on TNT. Steve Smith, NBA TV. Michael C. Wright, NBA.com. Knicks in 7. The casual analysis of New York is that, like every Tom Thibodeau coached team before this one, it plays harder during the regular season than many opponents. That edge fades when those rivals dial up to playoff intensity and Thibs' groups seem to lack an extra gear. But with OG Anunoby to put out fires, they were 20-3 when he played, and Jalen Brunson is the little engine that does, the Knicks should be glad they outworked their way to the high seed. Steve Ashburner, who explains his pick and more. 3. Milwaukee vs. 6. Indiana. Steve Ashburner, NBA.com. Carlos Boozer, NBA TV. Brendan Haywood, NBA TV. Shaquille O'Neal, NBA on TNT. Sean Powell, NBA.com. John Schumann, NBA.com. Kenny Smith, NBA on TNT. Steve Smith, NBA TV. Michael C. Wright, NBA.com. Pacers in 6. If Giannis Antetokounmpo were healthy, if it were a sure thing he'd be ready for game 2 or 3, or if the Bucks were facing a lesser opponent, they might still be favored here. But with only hope that he could return at some point in this series, it's hard to pick a team that hasn't been very good with their best player off the floor. John Schumann, who explains his pick and more. 4. Cleveland vs. 5. Orlando. Steve Ashburner, NBA.com. Carlos Boozer, NBA TV. Shaquille O'Neal, NBA on TNT. Sean Powell, NBA.com. John Schumann, NBA.com. Kenny Smith, NBA on TNT. Steve Smith, NBA TV. Michael C. Wright, NBA.com. Magic in 7. If it goes this long, Cleveland gets the final game at home. The Cavs have more spring experience than Orlando. They were in the play-in 2 years ago and lost to New York in the first round last spring. But they're not exactly peaking at the right time. Since these teams last met, the Cavaliers have gone 12-16. Orlando is 16-10 since that night, improving by 13 victories over last season to thrust Jamal Mosley into Coach of the Year conversations. Steve Ashburner, who explains his pick and more. 1. Oklahoma City vs. 8. New Orleans. Steve Ashburner, NBA.com. Carlos Boozer, NBA TV. Brendan Haywood, NBA TV. Shaquille O'Neal, NBA on TNT. Sean Powell, NBA.com. John Schumann, NBA.com. Kenny Smith, NBA on TNT. Steve Smith, NBA TV. Michael C. Wright, NBA.com. Thunder in 5. OKC was a top 5 team offensively and defensively, showing the balance that produced a top seed. There really isn't an exploitable area on this team, at least in this round, other than physical toughness in the paint. That, and with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander being the biggest talent on the floor, it all screams a short stay for New Orleans. Sean Powell, who explains his pick and more. 2. Denver vs. 7. LA. Lakers. Steve Ashburner, NBA.com. Carlos Boozer, NBA TV. Brendan Haywood, NBA TV. Shaquille O'Neal, NBA on TNT. Sean Powell, NBA.com. John Schumann, NBA.com. Kenny Smith, NBA on TNT. Steve Smith, NBA TV. Michael C. Wright, NBA.com. Nuggets in 4. Nikola Jokic averaged a triple-double against Anthony Davis last year in the playoffs, and there's no reason to expect a drop-off this time. Los Angeles lacks depth and the firepower in the starting group to keep up with Denver's experienced core. The Nuggets finished the 2022-23 regular season in a slump. They enter this postseason rolling. This won't be close. Michael C. Wright, who explains his pick and more. 3. Minnesota vs. 6. Phoenix. Steve Ashburner, NBA.com. Carlos Boozer, NBA TV. Brendan Haywood, NBA TV. Shaquille O'Neal, NBA on TNT. Sean Powell, NBA.com. John Schumann, NBA.com. Kenny Smith, NBA on TNT. Steve Smith, NBA TV. Michael C. Wright, NBA.com. Suns in 6. The Wolves had the second best season in franchise history, and their reward is getting the worst possible first-round matchup. They're spooked by the Suns, who led by double figures during the second halves of every meeting this season. Anthony Edwards will need an epic nightly performance just to keep it suspenseful. And he might. Sean Powell, who explains his pick and more. 4. LA Clippers vs. 5. Dallas. Steve Ashburner, NBA.com. Carlos Boozer, NBA TV. Brendan Haywood, NBA TV. Shaquille O'Neal, NBA on TNT. Sean Powell, NBA.com. John Schumann, NBA.com. Kenny Smith, NBA on TNT. Steve Smith, NBA TV. Michael C. Wright, NBA.com. Mavericks in 6. Luka Doncic and the Mavs ran off a 16-2 record near the end of the regular season before coasting to the finish line for extra rest ahead of the playoffs. Still, Dallas is carrying real momentum into the postseason against the banged-up Clippers. Yes, the Mavs are legit. They're quietly the team nobody wants to see in these playoffs. Michael C. Wright, who explains his pick.